thank you guys so much for joining us on the third day of VMworld 2014. I'm Rick Shear. I'll be your MC for this the Experts vBloggers panel. We're all tired, right? It's end of day 3. It's a long week. I did this in my last session. I think it kind of worked. I need everyone to do a power clap. I think that will wake up everybody, and we'll get things started. So do a power clap on 3. So 1, 2, 3. Woo! Awesome. All right, we're ready to go. So let's forward-looking statements. All right. Before we get into this, we've done this for a number of years now. It's one of my favorite sessions, where we just be candid and fluid and talk to the audience about your problems, right? So this is an Ask the Experts panel, which means that it's really about you guys, and it's on you to make this good, right? So for us to earn our keep, we're really dependent on your shoulders. So this session's all about you guys. Any questions that you may have, problems you're trying to work through, issues that you found in any one of our products, right? You have Scott from the NSX business unit. You have Duncan from the Evo Rails BU. William, all about automation, orchestration, scripting, right? Chad and myself from EMC. No holds barred, open. Tell us, where things are good, where things are horrible. Ask your questions. Again, if you guys don't ask us questions, we're just here hanging out, chatting, which is fine, but it'd be no value to you guys, right? So I'll go into some rules here in a second, but before we do that, just do some brief introductions. Again, I'm Rick Shear. I run a blog site, VMwareTips.com. I'm also a principal engineer at EMC with focus on everything that has a V in front of it. Actually, plus OpenStack, so everything with a V or OpenStack involved there.
And some pivotal paths stuff too, right? So.
Yeah, yes. So I cover every single product that's in the EMC and VMware product family. Also on our panel, we have Mr. Duncan Epping.
Yeah, Duncan Epping, Chief Technologist, and at the moment working for the Evo Rail team. So I'm responsible for the hyperconverged infrastructure approach. And I do some blogging on Yellow Bricks occasionally, and on Twitter as well, of course.
All right, thank you. Next, we have Mr. William Lam.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. My name is William Lam. I'm a staff architect within VMware R&D. I primarily focus on integration, operation, and automation of our software-defined data center.
All right, and next to me, Mr. Scott Lowe.
Good afternoon, everyone. Scott Lowe, working in the Network and Security Business Unit, the CTO's office there, focusing on NSX and all things open.
And finally, at the very end, Mr. Chad Sackage.
Hello, everybody. I'm Chad. I lead all the SEs at EMC, so everybody who's a nerd in the field are part of my brotherhood and sisterhood. And I write a blog, virtualgeek.typepad.com. Hi.
All right, great. Well, before I get into this, first, I don't think I did it the other day, but I want to do it now. I just want to thank you guys for taking the time out of your busy schedules.
Thank you, man.
Oh. I love, this is honestly my favorite session. It's not because I'm on stage or anything. I actually love the conversations. I love how, depending on whatever technology has been announced, that's what all the questions are about, it seems. So I guarantee the questions will be on NSX or Evo Rails.
And relationships.
And really, yeah. So this is, I'm giddy with joy, right? Because this technology is awesome. We have, some of the best experts, if not the best experts in the entire industry, and it's a great time. So with that, again, it's all about you guys. So please start lining up at the microphones in the center of the room. That's where we'll do the Q&A. We'll make lines. And also, some of the best questions we hear today was actually given by EMC Elect, these pocket whiteboards. So I don't want to open it up because it's pretty cool, but it's this size, but it opens up to a fairly large size whiteboard with a marker on it. So pretty cool, geeky type thing to have.
It's a portable whiteboard. Why couldn't you? Yeah, I could use that every day.
Right.
No, we get one, right?
No.
I actually brought two of my books with me as well. So the virtual sandbook that I just authored with Cormac Hogan. So for any of the good questions, I also have a good book available.
Oh, awesome. So yeah, the best questions. Or I have 3 of those, and how many books do you have? So if we only get 5 questions, then all 5 get something really cool. So again, it's on you guys to make this interactive. Otherwise, again, we'll just be staring at each other, which is fine because we're all attractive guys. So the rules of this, 60 seconds per response. Sorry, Chad, but 60 seconds per response. I do have some leeway in there, right? Because if it's a topic that I know all 4 panelists won't be involved in, I'll give 1 or 2 panelists some extra time, right? So I'm trying to limit to each question to under 5 minutes, so we get a good number of questions answered. Again, everything goes. If you just want to bitch at Chad or I that EMC sucks, hey, have at it.
Hello.
I didn't warn Chad about that, but
all good.
It's all good. It's all good. We're here to help you. Again, it's not about the panelists, it's about the audience. Please be interactive. Let's have fun.
Look at the lineup already, man.
Great lineup already. So with that, let's begin, and we'll take our first question from the first microphone.
Hey, Duncan. I was really excited seeing the Evo Rail stuff.
Can you raise the microphone a little bit? Apologize.
Sorry. There we go. I was excited seeing the Evo Rail stuff. Question that I've had on it, is there any capability to address external storage from inside of it? We're more storage constrained than anything else inside of it, so it's great, but I need more than 13 terabyte.
So first of all, if you look at the VMware solution, it will allow you to scale out, so you can add multiple appliances to the existing cluster that you've already formed. So by default, it comes with 4 individual nodes. If you add an additional appliance, the total capacity will go up as well. Now, if you look at the vSAN solution that it actually includes within the box, vSAN doesn't allow you, or at least not today, doesn't support you connecting a JBOD system to it. But of course, you can connect your external storage systems to the existing appliance. So if you have an NFS array or you have an iSCSI system sitting there, you can connect that in the exact same way as you do to your existing environment today. Just connect it to the Evo Rail box, and you can continue using that. So that shouldn't be a problem at all.
It is notable that if you did that, you'd have to punch out of the Evo Rail Manager UI and go into vCenter.
Okay, great. Thank you.
To add on to that question, one question I may have is, if I purchase an Evo Rails box, can I add a non-Evo Rail box to be a member of the vSAN group?
No.
What kind of question is that? No, sure. I mean, if you look at the technology itself, in the end, it's still vSphere. So there's just regular ESXi host. It's a regular vCenter instance. It's just vSAN. So you could do that from a technical point of view. Now, if you look at the mechanism that we've deployed and that we created and the way you go about managing these systems, I wouldn't recommend it because it will become more difficult to actually manage these systems. The key thing in my opinion, with EvoRail, it's all about simplicity of management, simplicity of procurement, and simplicity around support as well. As soon as you start doing things which are extremely out of the box, like adding just random nodes to a cluster, it will become more complicated for all of these different components.
See Chad
And
shaking his head.
I'm like, let's be clear, right? The product, EvoRail, isn't really a product. It's the OEM's product. And basically, again, I love VMworld, because we're all about hacking and what's possible, and it's good to know what's possible, right? Ants are totally technically possible. In the end, it's ESX and vCenter and vSAN underneath it, right? As soon as you did that, the Evo Rail Manager would freak out a little bit because now there's a new node in the cluster that's not part of its original, what it deployed, number one. Number two, if you ever called whoever is the OEM who's selling you the appliance, they'd go, what the hell is this? This is not an Evo Rail appliance. Because remember, it won't be called an Evo Rail appliance. It'll be called a Super Micro something, or a Dell blah, 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 or the EMC thing, right? The support people will... It's the actual name pre-GA of the appliance is the HCIA, the Hyperconverged Infrastructure Appliance. Creative, right? But the support system would break.
Okay. Excellent, thank you. We'll now move to the second microphone.
Micah checka, hey, it's on. All right, hey, as a former vBlock architect, I am curious in context specifically of Evo Rack, what's the messaging going to be between those two?
Oi. So, whoa, this is going to take me more than 60 seconds. All right, so
We got 55.
10 seconds
So the
left.
question was Evo rack positioning relative to vBlock, right? So answer is actually pretty short and simple. If a customer is deploying an application onto converged infrastructure that has high expectations of rich services, you're deploying SAP on top of Oracle on top of a vBlock, and you expect to be able to replicate consistent group, blah, 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 vBlock equals answer. If you are deploying data center at large scale and you don't have an expectation of those data services or anything like that, things like Evo Rack are more of the direction answer. To make it even more confusing, there's efforts to create an open Evo Rack where not only would it be open from the open compute side, which is the Evo Rack target, but EMC is using the same approach and saying, what happens if it's not the vSphere stack on it, but it's KVM or physical Linux containers on bare metal, right? Those are all, people are going to be confused for the next few years over there's more than one way to build converged infrastructure, and it's targeted at different customer and different use cases.
Yeah, the thing I would like to add to that as well, if you look at the Evo Rack solution, what they basically created is a reference architecture and a way to start deploying, for instance, NSX, VCAC, and all of the other components in a really easy fashion. So I can imagine that, for instance, VCE would also be interested in taking some of that logic and throw that on top of their building block, because it will make their life easier as well. Because I don't know if you guys ever deployed VCAC, and I've tried it in the past, and now William tried it as well. It's not easy.
All right, thank you, and thank you for the question. We'll move now back to the first microphone.
Hello, I just have more of a general like VM sizing type of question in relation primarily to vNUMA, which is a little more off topic from these two previous questions, but I've seen in the past where a customer wanted to add processors, so they went to edit settings, and the first drop-down box was sockets. So they just dropped it. I had one a week or two ago where they changed it to 30 sockets, and then they're wondering, why is my VM running so slow? Why do I have such high ready time? So my theory is always going in this one case, they had 4 physical NUMA nodes. I was like, well, let's drop your physical socket, or your virtual sockets to 4, and let's change your cores per socket to 7 to at least get you to 28. We still want to try to bring that down to run as fewer cores if we need to. But in the monster sizing presentation yesterday, I was surprised to hear them mention that VMware still recommends only changing the sockets and leaving the core count at 1 core per socket in edit settings. And that kind of ran counter to what I've always seen in my personal experience to make the VM run and fit better inside the physical NUMA of the host and have lower ready time. I don't know, I just kind of wanted to get some of you guys' experience or recommendations, or am I thinking about it backwards, or which way do we go on that? Not everyone all at once.
William, you want to take it?
So, guys, it can't be the non-VCDX who answers this question.
I can answer that question.
Okay, go for it.
Well, I think if you, the session that you went to, if you look at the recommendations that they did, I think a lot of those recommendations are fairly generic. I mean, if you look at the NUMA architecture itself, and you also look at some of the operating systems out there, there's about 5,000 different configurations or combinations that you can do in terms of configuring these different type of options when it comes to core count versus socket count. Some of the OSs don't support more than 1 or 2 cores, or it needs to be a specific combination of a number of sockets versus a number of cores. For instance, when you do Windows 2012, when you jack up the number of sockets, there's also there needs to be a specific number of cores from a virtualization point of view. So there's a lot of dependencies
and licensing.
And there's the licensing aspect as well. So some of the recommendations that I've seen were fairly generic. I think if you talk to people like Michael Webster, for instance, and I've seen some of his material on this topic, you will notice that it all comes down to monitoring ESX stop, when you start doing these performance tests and see what the response is from a ready time perspective. So, I would say that what you did is actually the right approach when it comes to managing these types of systems and architecting these types of environments, because the generic recommendations typically don't apply.
All right, we're out of time. The buzzer did
Really?
not.
No buzzer, I keep on going.
So, do you generally recommend to have your vNUMA always fit inside your pNUMA, so you never want more virtual sockets
That's personal.
than physical sockets? Well,
I'm here all night. Tip your waitress. So one question I had about that from a VM configuration perspective, sockets and core count, isn't that all scheduled just the same way? You're just changing the way it's viewed to the guest operating system?
No.
Or is there a scheduling difference?
There are differences in how the scheduler deals with this core and socket. I mean, I'm not the expert, but there is a difference in how the scheduler deals with it.
No, there is actually a difference when it comes to scheduling these types of things. So the scheduler actually takes, from a NUMA perspective, the cores versus sockets into account. So there is a difference when it comes to that. On top of that, the operating system actually handles specific calls for services also different if you specify a number of sockets versus a number of cores. So that could be beneficial in some cases, depending on the application architecture that you have, to actually jack up the number of sockets versus the number of cores and vice versa. The question he asked around fitting your vNUMA node within the pNUMA node, which I agree kind of sounds awkward. But the thing here is that from a performance point of view, as soon as you start crossing NUMA nodes, you'll need to fetch memory remotely, and you're starting to increase the resources for your virtual machines to ensure that you have a high-performant environment, and they are probably bigger machines, so you will want to make sure that they actually fit within the NUMA node.
And the bandwidth in an Intel CPU between the QPI, which is the socket communication, and the DMI, which is the direct memory interfaces that are on the local socket, it's like 10x in terms of bandwidth, so it can be pretty bad.
thank you.
Give the man a prize. Good question.
By the way,
Actually,
I still view Frank Denneman's NUMA
like a
post
whiteboard?
as Bible.
All right, round of applause for that, because
that was a great question.
That was a good question. All right, we'll go to the back microphone.
My question is on the hyperconverged. It seems, I guess, looking forward in that whole arena, I guess it seems like it's a big threat to a lot of the underneath vendors, networking arrays, blades. I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit.
So, you know what? I think anybody who's afraid of disruption and tries to play defensively eventually loses. So just as in life, as in sports, you can never win playing a defensive game. You have to play offense to win, right? So I think people who view fundamental technology disruption, and software-defined storage stacks that are scale-out software stacks are one of the key enabling ingredients for hyperconverged architectures, whether it's rail style or rack style. SDN and network overlays are fundamental new technology innovation that's out there on the market. I just think fundamentally, I don't know, I mean, the only people who worry about this within EMC, like in a negative way, just being very frank here, are the sales reps. The executive team, the SEs, the engineers are like, hey, new architectures will change, they'll move, they'll cannibalize, all flash will eat some hybrid, SDS will do this. In the end, for us, if the customer's happy, it's good.
Yeah, I think I have to agree with Chad on that. If you look at it from our perspective, I think it opens up a lot of opportunities for some of these vendors. If you look at it from a networking point of view, so the majority of these hyperconverged appliances actually don't include any form of networking. So you can imagine that some of these solutions will start including networking components, and you will see integration with stuff like NSX, or potentially other solutions out there as well by Cisco, for instance. So I personally think it opens up a lot of opportunities for other vendors.
Can I tell you a secret?
Don't tell anyone.
Did anyone see us acquire a company called DSSD? So it's basically an in-memory data fabric thing that bolts into the server via PCIe. One of the reasons we acquired it is we said this is a foundational technology that could be used in rack scale converged infrastructure architectures. In other words, there's even an opportunity to do software innovation, hardware innovation. You got to duck, dodge, weave. Like it's exciting, man. Like I don't know, I don't worry about it. If people within hardware companies are worried about it, I think they're missing opportunity.
I mean, there's plenty of, from my perspective at least, it seems like there's plenty of room for hardware vendors within the architecture prescribed by the Evo Rail and Evo Rack architectures to deliver differentiating, offloads is the best way I like to look at it. That will accelerate things like vSAN or accelerate things like NSX and encapsulation protocols or, various related technologies. So it doesn't, I mean, is it a threat for some hardware vendors out there, with this, kind of, you're not paying attention? Yeah, sure, but that's not a result of necessarily Evo Rail or Evo Rack. Yeah. That's just not paying attention.
From if I think like a customer for a second, I actually see this as a great thing, right? Because all competition does is drive innovation and drive down price, right? So I think the introduction of a Evo Rails type solution will push other hyper-converged technology companies that are out there to innovate more on their product, add more services, add more features. In turn, it will cause VMware to add more service, add more features to their vSAN product. So I think it's a win-win for the customer, right? And it's the OEM's battle to lose, right?
I just wanted to buzz you out, but I don't have the buzzer, so.
All right. Well, thanks for the question. Next.
Good afternoon, guys. I just had a question. There's a whole bunch of new technologies obviously coming out all the time. It never ends. And so I'm just curious what you guys use for your home labs or anything like that. And actually, a similar question was asked at the 2012, I think, VMworld, and I think Chad needed like a nuclear reactor or something to power. I was wondering if you
It's actually really shrunk. I did a refresh, and it's
split data center in the garage.
It's Evo Rails.
Well, actually, it actually last time I answered, I have like 300 terabytes of storage, a whole bunch of arrays, blah 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 blah, and 12 ESX hosts and a couple of 10 gig switches. That's actually compressed down. I did an Ivy Bridge based update, bought a ton of SSDs, used vSAN, eliminated the storage arrays. The use of so my biggest problem actually was that in the home lab, the power draw meant that I needed to put a 30 amp circuit in, right?
Yeah.
And the joke from last year was that, and this is a true story, eventually EMC was like, hey, we can't give you a raise. And I said, hey, let's do a deal. You pay my power bills and we'll call it even. And it was a win-win-win. But the interesting thing was that the power draw of switching towards SSDs and dense configurations and eliminating the storage arrays, which are always spinning the magnetic media, they're a power hog relative to the servers. I basically got it well under 10 amp draw at a steady state, and I could basically take the whole thing down. I went from 12 servers that were Sandy Bridge, went down to 3 Ivy Bridge based systems with 12 cores a pop, and just the other thing was RAM got so cheap. So I loaded up each one of them with like 128 gigs of RAM, and boom, done. I can run like anything I want in there.
Yeah, but your wife is really sad that the sound is gone.
Yeah, it's a lot quieter, right? The other thing I got to tell you is I've actually been using it less and less. You know what I use more and more? I use vCloud Air. I've got a vCloud Air account, and as much as I'm trying to stay on top of VMware's core tech stack, the biggest challenge for me now is to learn a lot of these new automation languages and tools, to learn more about OpenStack, following kind of Scott's lead, and I'm starting to try to learn to develop some code and play with pivotal paths stacks. So, I'm doing that more actually in my vCloud Air account.
All right, love to hear. Actually, William, what do you have?
Yeah, definitely. Well, you don't need to run a nuclear reactor to run your lab. I mean, that's first off. I mean, there's a lot of different options. Like Chad said, there's definitely plenty of options. Like in my home lab, I have a beefy server, but I also have some, tiny footprint because power is definitely a concern for a lot of home labs. And so like a Mac Mini, Intel NUC is a really great platform. Instead of buying a really heavy, dense server where if the system dies, you lose everything, you can have a couple of Mac Minis for the same price, but you have additional capabilities. If you want to test vSAN, right, we have a couple of customers actually using Mac Minis with vSAN, loading it with a couple of SSDs. You have something like hands-on labs, right? So if you want to just quickly test something, you can go on, it's completely free, go on there, test something. Once it's done, it gets thrown away. You have vCloud Air, like Chad mentioned. There's also some new startups out there, like companies like Ravello, that's really focused on dev test use cases where I just want to quickly test something. I want to deploy a couple of nested ESXi, a couple of solutions. It's a pay-as-you-go service. It's deployed on AWS or vCloud Air. You deploy it, run it, and once you're done, you throw it away. And so it really depends on what your use case is for and stuff. But I'm sort of, at the end of the day, there's definitely a lot of options. And I definitely highly recommend looking at platforms like the Mac Mini and the Intel NUCs for running ESXi and all of our other virtual appliances.
Yeah, that's what I use.
Duncan?
Yeah, well, currently I actually don't have a home lab anymore. I gave it away about 6 months ago. I mean, I joined the VMworld team, or actually I was part of the founding members of the VMworld team. So all of our hardware partners were quite happy to give us a whole bunch of boxes. But when I still had my home lab, it was basically a really beefy workstation. I just had Windows sitting there with VMware Workstation, and I did everything virtual. I loaded it up with a whole bunch of SSDs, and I must say that works fine, especially when you're primarily using it to create screenshots, to do some simple tests around creating virtual machines, just trying to figure out how some of the functionality works, right? So Workstation is actually a great product to use when it comes to home labs.
So in my role, I'm asked to be involved in all things open. So my lab, from a hardware perspective, is probably not that different. I have a couple of the 2U 4-node boxes from Dell. These are a couple years old, bought them off eBay. A couple tower servers, a Mac Mini, a Mac Pro, a few things here and there. But the software stack is completely open source. So it's Ubuntu KVM, Open vSwitch with NSX on top of it, running OpenStack Icehouse. Within that, we're constantly testing stuff like CoreOS, new builds of OVS, Docker, Kubernetes, et cetera, storage is provided by Synology with a couple SSDs and some big spinning Rust. And that's about it. I have 1 gig backbone, currently trying to talk a networking vendor into giving me a 10 gig, but not successful yet.
Does anyone work for a networking vendor?
We should talk.
Come on, guys.
We should talk.
I'll trade you an array for more 10 gig switches.
I can't remember if it was our last session, but there was a question or something that came up around disconnecting, right? From like you get burned out and disconnect. So I'm a firm believer that work should be at work and home should be home. So for me, I felt that if I have a home lab, like servers, storage, racks, I'll get too attracted to go do that stuff on my free time, and my wife would be really mad, right? So for me, my home lab.
The difference over the years is he got a really awesome, good-looking girlfriend who's now your wife. You answered that question very differently over the last few years. I just noticed.
Before Mandy came along, that was a different story.
Yes.
He started to slow down his blog posts as well.
So so my home lab is, I really like the small form factor machines. So I built a mini ITX with a really powerful processor, a ton of RAM, a couple SSD drives, and just like Duncan, workstation for everything, right? And it works perfect for what I need to do.
So just to build on your point, Rick, I agree with you that disconnecting is important, and so I applaud you for kind of scaling back on that. And I went through a similar sort of wrestle over the last few years, and found that because I work from home, it was actually beneficial to have the home lab. So there may be instances where I agree, making sure you maintain a healthy work-life balance is absolutely important, no question about it. But for those of us whose home office is their office, right, then sometimes that's actually very beneficial. So
I'm surprised that more people don't use the online hands-on labs. They're really awesome, like really awesome. And for anyone who's interested, this currently isn't open for customers, but all you need to do is get your EMC SE that supports you a little bit drunk and get their credentials. There's a massive a lab that we run, like literally just for the size and scaling it. On a steady state, it's got about 50,000 VMs running. It's this thing that we call VLab, which is basically the same idea. and you can basically on demand, it uses VCAC and all that stuff. On demand, you can get anything, including arrays. So if you're an EMC customer and you want to play not only with vSphere, but actually with they're all actually provisioned as VMs, which is kind of cool. But just know that it's out there. It's portal.demo.com or demo.portal.com, something like that. Was that portal.demo? Portal.demoemc.com. That's it.
Make sure to buy Chad some drinks tonight. But I just want to quickly, I mean, Chad's completely right? All these different environments, especially in the hands-on labs, we have all these environments fully built out to spec. Like if you were to build it in the physical environment, it's all there for you guys to play with, right? The hands-on lab is completely free. It's a great environment. If you just need to quickly test something, write a script, validate it really quickly, spin it up in less than 15 minutes, you have something up and running. So it's really a great resource, and we're seeing more and more people use it. So we highly encourage you guys to definitely check it out after the VMworld, of course.
And you know, I think, William, you mentioned earlier Ravello, which is enabling customers to run VMware virtual machines on a public cloud service like GCE or AWS. So that's another opportunity. If you don't want to maintain your own noise and heat generator in the basement, that might be an option to explore as well. Also, again, pay as you go.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. All right, well,
Should we give him a thing? That was a good one.
Yeah, that was a good one. A whiteboard here for you.
Let me grab the books as well.
All right, there you go. And we'll move to the back microphone for the next question.
So as you guys try, or I guess as VMware tries to continue to build out vCloud Air, what do you talk to your service providers with who built their entire business on VSPP and, I mean, have that kind of, I don't know, that program when the technology, there's a pretty big gap between what forced vCloud Director to what you guys now have? Just curious.
So your question is around, what happens to service providers
all the
currently
other
at VSPP?
service providers that would compete with you guys now.
So that's a good question. I don't have the specific details. I know that the vCloud Air team is building out this idea of the vCloud Air network, which brings in provider partners into the service provider network to offer a similar set of capabilities. That very well could be the continuation or the evolution of what you saw in the past with VSPP and sort of the vCloud powered services. But beyond that, not being directly in that BU, I couldn't give you more details as exactly what their plans might be.
Any other comments on that? Yeah, it's hard not being part of that BU. There's hints that I saw like on blog posts, right?
So just if I were a service provider, I'm obviously not VMware, so this is now just me extemporaneously making a comment that is just Chad Sakach. That's it. If I were a service provider, I'd join into that vCloud Air network, but I'd realize that the vCloud Air network's whole structure will enable me to produce the same asset and value proposition that's exactly the same as any other member in that because it uses the whole stack that is there. I think that the service providers that I see that are part of that VSPP program over the last few years usually do something that is their mojo. Either they're localized, or they're focused on an industry vertical, and they offer services that others don't, and that's got to be the vehicle for sustained differentiation for a service provider. So if I was one of those, that's what I would do.
I mean, oddly enough, it seems like it would just be that they're going to become support staff and everything's going to run in vCloud Air. I mean, it would be an ultimate direction.
And I just think that there's an opportunity for everybody to innovate.
Yeah, no, I mean, if you think about it, vCloud Air is intended to address like the widest possible market, but there are going to be areas that simply aren't a fit for what vCloud Air does. It's too specific, too unique, too niche, right? So there's always, as Chad mentioned, an opportunity for VSPP-powered partners to build that sort of target market for themselves. And again, it could be that you're highly localized. It could be that you offer specialized SLAs. It could be that you have inked deals with major software vendors to do EMR or similar things and compliance, regulatory, blah, 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 blah. So I think there's plenty of room for differentiation for the people that fall outside of that bell curve of the traditional public cloud service that vCloud Air is shooting for.
In all my travels, it's pretty cool to go in all places and all, around the world and all different verticals. One place I saw that was just fascinating was I found a service provider that literally what they do is they are the service provider around clinical research. And clinical research is like the most highly regulated thing on the planet. And these guys did not go after general purpose infrastructure as a service or PaaS or whatever. They were like going after this market, which is fascinating because literally to produce a drug costs about $2 billion worth of R&D and then $2 billion for a clinical trial. and then you have to start it again. And they basically built their whole business around that, and they're going like crazy, right? Like, but that's an example of picking a thing and going after it that I guarantee that vCloud Air is not going to do.
Having been in clinical research early in my career, I mean, that's absolutely right. That's a perfect opportunity to go say, this is a business need that needs to be addressed that vCloud Air is not going to go after, so I can go after it and take it.
Great, thanks for the question. We'll go to the front microphone.
So it seems like EvoRail is making a really good step in terms of making infrastructure easy. But one of the most neglected things that I find with most of our customers is firmware management. So I was wondering if there was anything, whether it's OEM-based or whether it's VMware-based, that handles the firmware updates on the actual hardware.
Yeah, that's a question that has come up probably about 5 or 6 times now. So something that we realized as well as soon as we started working with the various partners. So we do realize that it's a challenge. So today in the current version, it's now actually a problem that we've solved. So firmware management or component management by itself even. The bigger challenge here is we've announced 6 partners. And unfortunately, all of these 6 partners handle firmware in a different way. So they've got different tools for it, not just for their compute nodes, but also for all of their flash drives, magnetic drives, disk controllers, NICs, you name it. So what we're aiming to do is to create some form of abstraction layer that will allow us and allow them actually to create tools that will enable you to start updating the different types of firmware that are available. Now, VRAC, for instance, or EvoRack, as I should call it externally, is aiming to solve that problem as well. And I've heard that, I actually was talking to someone on the booth today, and apparently they've already cracked that problem. So I'm assuming that the engineering teams will start chatting to each other and see how we can incorporate their solution into our solution.
That's actually an interesting example where that work is actually happening in concert. So the EvoRack team that's working to crack that problem, it's the same problem for the don't just assume that you put NSX on it. What happens if you need to put raw KVM or physical or whatever? And that's actually one where the 2 teams are simultaneously solve the problem of how do you create a hardware abstraction layer. That's really the deal there. But that's coming. I know that we're working on it.
And that's actually the longer term strategy, but sort of in the shorter term strategy, if you look at some partners like Dell and HP, we actually do have drivers and VIBs that's been built in, like Dell, for instance, they have their iDRAC that actually allows you to do some firmware integration. We've also been talking to some in the engineering because IPMI and out-of-band management is something that's personal to me. Like I want to be able to completely automate the entire stack. And so that is something that engineering is actually currently looking into, and things we can extend like ESX CLI so we can actually build that in natively. So in the shorter term, you may see some enhancements in those areas. I can't really speak to details, but longer term, we definitely are looking in terms of full management of the hosts, all the way up to even the networking. So some of the guys on the VRAC stack is definitely looking into that.
But to be very specific, so everyone kind of groks what we're saying here, right? IPMI, awesome. Every vendor's IPMI implementation is different, right? So hardware abstraction layers are basically things that abstract, and it's a general policy that's a good idea with any API, is don't write directly to the API, build to the abstraction layer that abstracts the API. So basically this hardware abstraction layer that we're describing, one of the things that it would do is it would abstract out IPMI across multiple vendors. In theory, being able to do it also for firmware or even manifesting hardware faults, which everyone does differently, right?
BIOS configuration and all that stuff.
Thanks.
Thank you. Second for the next question.
So I have a question concerning storage and auto-tiering. We use EMC storage, and it's auto-tiered. And on Monday morning, the SAP Basis team complains about disk latency. And sure enough, the latency goes up, the IOPS go up as well. And we can't figure out whether it's because of the auto-tiering that things just move over the weekend, or is it because there's just more users using the system? So is this something we could expect from auto-tiering, or is this an entirely different scenario?
So first things first, thank you for being a customer. No technology is a panacea, and auto-tiering is no different. Auto-tiering will always have a delayed response to I/O load, right? And what I would argue is that I'm going to follow up with you directly and follow up exactly what's going on and take a look at it. I'd encourage you to actually use are you also using VCOps? vCenter Operations?
No.
There's a really great plugin for VCOps that would help you diagnose exactly where this is occurring on a VMAX or a VNX. I would just note this is where all flash arrays are different than hybrids, right? Tiering is good, but it will always have a delayed response to I/O load. So I'll follow up with you specifically and find out what's going on with your particular case, but the short answer is no. There's something else that's going on Mondays that is causing the array to behave differently. I would suspect that it's not auto-tiering. I suspect it's probably something else that's creating front-end load on the machine.
All right, thanks for the question. We'll move forward to the front microphone.
My question's around NSX. So our current reference architecture is very similar to VCE. So Nexus on the core and the edge, Cisco UCS on the compute layer, and vSphere. We're looking at NSX, and the value proposition of virtualizing the network layer is pretty compelling, but we have a significant investment in F5 from an APM perspective and Cisco ASA from a firewall perspective. So I'm interested in your view on how quickly the capabilities of load balancing and firewall will advance such that I can displace F5 and ASA, because for us, the network virtualization just isn't enough of a cost takeout. I mean, we certainly get the operational advantages, changing the model and the flexibility, but unless we can really take out the whole network layer and virtualize the whole thing with sort of like-to-like functionality, the total value prop's just not there.
Okay, so are you using the virtual ASA or physical ASA firewalls?
Physical, and we have the 1000V today without VSG. We're assuming that's going away.
Okay, and multiple trust zones in your data center or a single trust zone?
3 trust zones today.
With physical ASAs between them?
Correct.
Okay. So, this week we announced availability of NSX 6.1. Which is a new release for NSX in pure vSphere environments. Number of enhancements there. Some of them are very, very powerful, like eCMP support for multiple edge devices, which means we can dramatically drive up bandwidth through edge devices, which is very cool. One of the things that was included in that announcement was some integrations with F5 load balancers specifically. So there are some integrations that you could explore between NSX 6.1 and your F5 load balancers to both coordinate traffic going to your physical load balancers when that's necessary, as well as spinning up virtual instances or VEs of the F5 pieces. As far as the ASAs go, there is no work going on currently to integrate the ASAs. We've invited Cisco to participate in the NetX partner program to provide that integrations, and of course we have integrations ongoing with a number of security vendors, Palo Alto, Checkpoint, Juniper, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I probably wasn't clear enough. I guess the question really was, when will NSX have the capability so I can get rid of my F5s and ASAs?
Okay, without knowing the specific, that's a fair question. Without knowing the specifics of what you are using in those products, I can't tell you whether we could displace them today or whether it'll be a future release. The reality is that much like vCloud Air doesn't attempt to address every single possible customer need, NSX shoots for the most area under the bell curve, right? So our load balancer, our logical load balancer functionality can do, SSL termination, can do layer 7 content rules, that kinds of stuff, inline, load balancing. It can't load balance UDP, for example. Now, if that is something you're using on your F5s, then we can't displace it today. If you aren't using something like that, then we might be able to displace your F5s today. Same goes for the ASAs. What are you doing with the ASAs? Our stateful firewall and the distributed firewall can do L2 through L4, fully stateful, enforcement distributed across all the hypervisors with a central place to manage policy. If you're using something that's specific to an ASA, then we're probably not going to hit that. You're welcome. We can catch up directly afterwards and talk about some of the specifics, but without knowing the specifics, I can't tell you. I can tell you that from a market perspective, we're going to shoot to address the biggest possible need that will address, the needs of most customers.
Just in my experience, the number of customers that I run into that pick a hardware platform and then they use it, but if you really peel back, like, are they doing something that's really funky, it's often they're pretty vanilla. Again, I'm not saying that that's your case. Your answer is right. It depends, and let's talk. But
So
No, I wouldn't disagree with that. I mean, a lot of people buy the F5s because, you know, it's like the Cadillac of load balancers, right? And they want the best of the best in their data center, and that's fine. And I mean, you know, that's a design decision that you make when you're doing your architecture, right? Well, it's perceived that way.
You never drove a European car, right?
I actually
come on, the Cadillac, really?
Okay. I used to have a BMW actually, so it's okay. I drove an M series, so yeah, I'm familiar with that. But you know, just from a brand perception, like you know, and but the reality is that you may not be leveraging features that require you to use those hardware appliances.
So basically, you're saying we would need to do an assessment of our current state capabilities on the F5 and the SA and compare them to what's in NSX today. But can I assume that the feature functionality will continue to increase in those two areas?
I mean, we're relentlessly going to drive to improve the product and add features as dictated by customer demand. So the best thing for you to do is hook up with your NSX, you know, your account team, get the deep dive on NSX 6.1, find out where the features are, and then move forward from there. But of course, we will continue to drive improvements in the product.
One interesting thing as someone who makes both software and software appliances is EMC. Our ability to refresh the software-only variations are actually faster. The hardware appliances are tied to hardware refreshes. So again, it's not saying that it's intrinsic, but when you ship a hardware appliance, the software is tied to that release cycle. And as we take some of our software stacks and liberate them from the hardware, it actually accelerates their revs, just as an observation.
Yeah, we've run into that exact problem with Riverbed.
With what?
Riverbed.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
All right, thanks for the question. The next one we'll actually take from the front microphone because I noticed he was waiting longer than the back microphone. So,
okay.
Up front.
Okay, I'm a storage administrator. Been a storage administrator for about 10 months now. Coming from a job that I had about 30 servers. Now I have about 1,000, and I have NetApp, I have EMC, I have Dell EqualLogic. It's just like all these different storage arrays to manage. And I was just wondering if you guys could give me any tips. I'm on Fiber Channel and iSCSI. If you guys could each give me about 12 seconds of any your best ideas for a new storage administrator. Just like, because I came into that position, and it's a university, and we had first time I logged in, I had 7 bad drives. Raids were about to fail. The previous storage administrator got let go because of an IBM system, and he put a hard drive in, and the metadata went to all the other hard drives, took the whole RAID configuration down. So I mean, yeah. So I always am looking for the best way so I don't get in that same situation. So we go through change request. Whenever I have to replace one hard drive, I have to go through a change request. So I mean, I'm watching myself, but I just want to know if you guys had any tips. I love the job. Yeah. I just want to say I love my job.
I'll do it in 12 seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go vSAN.
There's this thing called LinkedIn where you can find jobs. Okay, so try to be serious. I'd start by just getting everything up to proper firmware levels, you know, health, just stabilize the patient.
It's
right?
stabilized now.
The second thing I'd say is I would, as much as possible, this is going to sound like an advert, I really don't mean it that way, I would abstract the APIs as much as possible. Okay. You can use our thing, the Viper controller, if you want, but if you don't choose to do it some other way.
He said 12 seconds.
Yeah. Automate.
12 seconds.
Automate. When you find yourself logging into the UIs, you're making a mistake.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, again, my focus is the open source space, so, you know, maybe looking at something like OpenStack and using Cinder as that abstraction layer may be something that would be of value to you. Obviously, the workloads will be fairly limited in terms of what you can do with it, but it might be something to explore as a potential option. But standardize as much as possible. Get rid of the stuff that, you know, was grown up organically, and try to, you know, say I'm going to stick with 2, maybe 3 at the most core vendors moving forward to help minimize that.
Okay. Yeah, and I agree with what Scott and Chai kind of mentioned. Another thing you can also look at is something like VCO. Right, you mentioned a lot of different array vendors, right? You can use Viper sort of as that abstraction layer from EMC, but if not, you can also leverage VMware's VCO, which is actually a free solution for being a VMware customer, and there's a lot of different plugins, and what you can actually do as a storage administrator is create these different workflows for, you know, adding devices, removing devices, retiring it, and creating these workflows for your operationals team, and so that also helps you minimize the number of times you're manually going to each of these solutions, especially if you're doing it not that frequently. You may make a mistake, and so if you kind of document this through using VCO and different workflows and automating it, it makes it much easier, and you can kind of create a run book for your operators as you hire additional administrators.
And the Viper thing is free, by the way, and if you want to use it without, with its community support, if you want to, phone call support, you have to pay for it. But the thing is that literally, as opposed to writing a bunch of different VCO workflows, or Cinder one way and VCO workflows another way, it literally already has a bunch of libraries for VCO workflows. It has a Cinder plugin for all of the things that you just described. So it's like kind of like a harmonizer of all of the crap.
So I know we try to avoid sales pitches, but honestly, what you're looking for, Viper is a really cool tie to probably help do everything you need to do. Out of curiosity, though, I try to keep up on other technologies that are out there. From the panel and even from the audience, are there other alternatives to Viper Controller? I know like Cinder obviously is kind of down that same path.
But it's OpenStack only.
Right, it's OpenStack only. There's, SMIS has always been a promise.
Which kind of sucks.
Right. Are there any other options or alternatives?
From a vendor neutral perspective, there's been some discussions of doing open source storage systems, but
we're actually debating open sourcing Viper Controller just a little.
There's most of the kind of the virtualization, storage virtualization pieces are being heavily, IBM SVC, EMC vPlex, NetApp vFilers, those there really isn't a really good kind of other solution. So.
I still think he should go to vSAN, so give him a book.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
It was a good question.
So, you can sell all those arrays by vSAN and learn about it right there. All right. We'll go to the back microphone for our next question.
So this is very much in line with what we're just talking about, but if you're looking at writing to the APAs, let's assume we can't say Viper as the solution. Would you look at abstracting out to OpenStack to write to VMware? Would you write directly to VMware SDKs, vCloud SDKs, things like that? I mean, there's just a lot of options, a lot of languages that you're really, looking at.
I didn't get that first part. Could you repeat that first part?
The part where you can't say Viper, or no?
He said if you can't use Viper.
Basically, what would you look at from an SDK platform? I mean, there's a lot of options. I mean, you could go to an OpenStack, which is going to have integrations into a lot of things already. But if you're looking at, I have to integrate into Hyper-V over here, I may use PowerShell, whatever. Just trying to kind of blend these development platforms together a bit.
It really depends, right? If you're talking about OpenStack, you're going to be talking about the OpenStack APIs, right? And Cinder's going to expose some capabilities up through the common set of OpenStack APIs. If you talk about vSphere, depending on what level, right? If you're talking about vSAN, we have vSAN policy that's being exposed through the vSphere APIs. There may see some SPBM capabilities if you're not using vSAN. So it really just depends on where you're trying to create the integration at. But sort of to answer your question, vSphere, common vSphere APIs and OpenStack for the OpenStack set of APIs.
And guys, sorry, go ahead, Scott.
No, I was just going to say, to your question, I'm hearing you talk about this, but then you say, well, should I write to vSphere APIs, or should I throw in OpenStack, or should I talk Hyper-V? I mean, we're kind of, looking for like the Rosetta Stone of things, and it doesn't exist. So, I mean, if you're willing to accept the constraints that OpenStack introduces, and there
Absolutely,
are some.
yeah, there are
right?
different platforms, but like if you're looking at something where, I mean, it's just bringing in information into, it's a homegrown system, so there's APIs that are getting written into it, and looking at writing directly at individual products. And the reason I was saying don't say Viper is because actually Viper would potentially eliminate some of these issues. But when you're looking at like a OpenStack, which is already going to have integration with VMware, right? And so no matter what happens with that, you're going to deal with that API call.
I got to tell you, the reason that we created the Viper controller, and it's not going to make any money for us, right? Just to be clear, people don't pay for control abstraction, right? It is a freaking massive problem for customers all over the place, and your brand is a difficult thing. Like some people are like, EMC is the evil machine company. We actually approached, I'll leave a blank name in here, large open source project and said, hey, this could be an awesome thing. And they were like, we don't trust that your motivation is pure, right? And so, you know, okay, so we'll do some more code contributions and blah 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 to earn our cred, right? But I got to tell you, there is no answer to this problem that exists. And frankly, if you say, oh, I'll use Cinder, that locks in the OpenStack answer. If you say, oh, I'll use SPVM, that means that the workload is a VM. And if you say, and by the way, Cinder means it's a block device, you know, like, so, and no customer is like that. So that's why we actually invested money to build it. And frankly, the other reason, sorry, one thing is we suffer from it from the most. Why? Because we have the broadest storage portfolio. We got customers who got one of these, a VMAX with a VNX, and they're like, dudes, can you make this freaking easier for us? And that's why we made it. So.
And it's a hard problem too, right? You also have to compare the pros and cons, right? If you're looking to do this, you need to have a development team. You really need to commit through that. And this is a really difficult problem. And you have people across the industry really working against this and providing open source and both commercial use and all that. So that's the other trade-off you have to think about too, is if you want to develop it yourself, you also have to understand what does that mean. You need to support it. You have to have a development organization to support it. I mean, it's a huge cost to maintain that kind of code base.
So what's interesting is we have 200 developers that work on this in Seattle. Right, like, so that's the level of scoping of work that you're talking about. And the number of people that contribute just to Cinder is a solid group of folks that work pretty damn hard on it just for Cinder. And I don't, you know, I'm sure VMware's got a ton of engineers on SPVM. It is really non-trivial. The people who also solve this problem in their own environments are the hyperscale guys, and in some cases they have thousands of developers that work on hyper-automation like this. So it is not easy.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the question. We only have about 5 minutes or so left, so I'm going to maybe try and go through like a hyper round of Q&A here. We have, I think, 3 guys standing, so let's see if we can power through these to make sure all the questions are answered. So up on the front microphone.
I will ask a very easy question. So can you please name like one product or feature that you think it will kind of that announce this VMworld that like biggest impact, make difference real for industry, and another like name one some kind of new product that or new vendor that you discovered here on this VMworld that you didn't know before. Thank you.
All right, I'll jump in first. I've got a couple that I think are really, really powerful. VMware Integrated OpenStack, I think is huge. I think a lot of people underestimate the impact that's going to have. And 2, I would say pay close attention to the work that VMware is doing in partnership with Pivotal and Google around, and Docker around containers and Kubernetes.
Well, the answer for me is pretty obvious, right? EvoRail as the product. If I look at all of the vendors out there, I think one of the products that I started looking into in the last couple of days is Thousand Eyes, which is a network monitoring solution that actually enables you to track packets from the user all the way down to your data center, so it has multiple levels of integration. It's something that's, in my opinion, is truly unique. It's fairly new. It's unknown to most of the people, but I think it's a really cool solution.
All right, yeah. I want everybody else to answer too. Let's just try and keep it to like a company name and product, and then you guys could definitely go search more about it.
Yeah, I also agree with Duncan. It's going to have to be EvoRail, and the reason for I see it is just a different consumption model, sort of how customers traditionally consume our software, hardware stack, sort of all in one, and really simplifying that user experience. Secondly, also agree with Scott on the whole Kubernetes and Google partnership. I think there's some really interesting there, and there's a lot of development going in there, so definitely that's an area that I'm definitely looking into.
Second everything they said, but I'm going to say one different. I think that the vCloud Air product announcements would be a big one for me. Really important to have public cloud choices. And the company would be Node Prime, a neat company I met this morning.
For me, my two cool things on the VMware side, VM Fork.
Project Fargo.
Project Fargo, right? Awesome, right? Google search it. What it does is amazing. Secondly, on the outside, it's a toss-up between like Mirantis with Fuel and
NetApp.
What's that?
A NetApp?
No, NetApp. No. Mirantis
really?
with Fuel. Mirantis with Fuel and Canonical with Juju. I think those are really cool technologies.
Thank you very much.
All right. On the back microphone.
I'm looking for some clarification on what to set IOPS equal to. We have vCenter, and we're noticing some discrepancies in vCenter and what the SAN people are seeing. And we're hearing that it should be set to 1, and currently it's set to the default of 1,000.
You're talking about the IOPS
Talking
round
about the
robin
round
setting?
robin IO
Yes,
threshold.
Yep, that's it.
So, what array are you using is the first question?
What array?
Yeah.
It's a VMAX.
It's a VMAX, it should be set to 1.
Across the board or just for databases?
Across the board. The answer is that the best practice varies array target by array target. You should look at your array vendor's best practice as a general statement. I just happen to know that the answer on that one is 1.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and our final question.
So I have questions about vVol, and I mean, this kind of crosses stacks, but it's
This is our first vVol question. It's awesome, yeah, finally.
So you go closer to the mic. It's hard to hear you.
Pretty storage oriented. I mean, I know the impact that, I've been around a EMC product line for probably better part of a decade, and
thank you.
I know the entire idea of provisioning is changing. That the entire idea of storage connectivity is changing with vVol and how we're going to actually start storing data on the storage arrays and even within vSAN. What is this going to look like outside of VMware? What's the answer to vVols other than some kind of legacy emulation to present a LUN, quote unquote, to a host that happens to be outside of the VMware stack?
Interestingly, VMware is actually trying to drive, along with the storage ecosystem, the vVol into the various standards bodies. So it's on the block side, it would be part of the T10 standards that are used for block devices, and that it would mean that it would be possible to use it for other use cases. I will tell you, it's causing a lot of brain explosions. So does anyone here actually manage a VMAX? Just show of hands. The new VMAX has no hypers, no metas, no slices, no cylinders. That's gobbledygook for people that don't do this stuff, but literally for a long time, Symmetrics people, they actually are rejecting it because it's too simple, right?
The perception is that EMC is lying to us.
Right. So they're like, oh, surely you just smoke and mirrored over those things, and the answer is no, because the design target is everything's a pool, everything's a storage container, the primary consumption are vVols, and it's going to change storage architectures from soup to nuts. And it's going to change how people provision stuff, and usually the last thing to change are people and process. So.
And to add to that, if you looked at all of the announcement this week, so Open Compute Platform, some of the OpenStack stuff, the work with Google, the work with Docker, for instance, I think VMware is actually actively trying to drive a lot of the development in-house and help the open source community out there as well. So we're actively trying to enable other partners and open source communities as well to start using the same technology as we've developed for our platform. So hopefully that also applies to virtual volumes, as Chad said. We're trying to drive these standards at least down to the appropriate organizations. But it's going to take time. I mean, standards always take time.
I was looking actually at Stackalytics, and in the Juno release, VMware I think cracked the top 10 code contributors.
We were number 4 in Icehouse.
Yeah. So it's impressive.
So we've been a top 10 contributor for the last few releases. So yeah, I mean, Duncan's absolutely right. We're continuing to push on enablements in all types of platforms for not a consuming infrastructure, but allowing users to then in turn consume that.
Sure, thank you.
I think that deserves a whiteboard. So if you want to come on up, I'll give you a pocket whiteboard.
Woohoo!
With that, I think we're out of time, so I'd like to thank our panel.
Thank you, dude. Thank you.
Be sure to make sure you fill out this survey on the app because with your vote, that keeps us around for next year. So thank you guys very much.
Or send a clear signal that it wasn't so hot.
or we won't come back. So again, thank you guys very much. Thank you to the panel. Thank you for the audience for making this possible. Enjoy the rest of your week. Have fun tonight at the party.
Yeah, enjoy the party.
Yeah, it'll be a
Thanks,
great time.
guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.